This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders that are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and today I'm joined by Crystal Lynn Garrett. Crystal is one of the most trusted financial advisors in the country and has spent nearly 3 decades helping families, corporate leaders, and new retirees move through one of life's biggest transitions with clarity and confidence. Her new book, The Next Chapter, blends financial guidance with the emotional realities of retirement so readers understand how to build a life that feels stable, purposeful, and aligned with what matters most. Crystal Lynn Garrett, welcome to the show. How are you?
Beautiful today. It's a beautiful day here in Texas. Yeah.
Great to hear it. So Crystal Lynn, I want to start by talking about financial literacy. And so I love to tell this story to people that are in the financial advising world because a few years ago, I was working with a younger millennial and I was working at a radio station in New York, and he stormed into the studio and he said, "Can you believe what the business office did to me? They put me in something called a 401k and they're taking my money out. I want my money now. What is this BS?" And then all the adults in the room had to sit him down and sort of do a basic overview of what a 401k is. But this kid came from an educated family. He wasn't like a teenager. He was in his 20s, had no idea what a 401k is. And so let's start there with the idea of like, I know a lot of people are involved in this space, but it seems like not enough people know about this space.
Yeah. I mean, we are not unhappy about some legislative changes that make that, possible for employers to just make it automatic, kind of like Social Security. You never see it. You didn't know you were doing it because it's a huge thing. And it's not just 401ks, but it's, what's a mortgage and credit card debt, and should I buy or lease a car, and home ownership, and all of those things. And so fortunate for us in the work that I do, most of the people are coming to me at the time that they're getting closer to retiring. Although I do have, folks coming and thinking about, what do I need to do? Do I have enough? And what do I need to do the next 20 years? Those folks are usually already engaged, right? They're aware that even people like me exist, but there's a lot of folks out there that, paycheck to paycheck and don't save, and awareness, we do all that we can. But even to your point, generations where, mom and dad have a pension and a 401k and have done all the right things, but somehow the message didn't get, down to the 20-year-old.
Yeah, it's funny. And so you mentioned the fact that you work with a lot of folks that are close to retirement, and you open the book talking about Louise, who's very anxious about retirement. And so let's get into like not the brass tacks of it, but the ephemeral side, like sort of the feelings that are, and you describe as her anxious. Is that one of the most common sort of feelings most people walk in once they start to like look at the calendar, like, oh boy, it's getting closer and closer. Tell me about those emotions.
Yeah. And we call that behavioral finance, and it happens in a lot of different areas. But I would say more people than not have some type of anxiety around the transition, right? It's a huge transition. People spent, 30, 40 years working and saving, and this whole idea of, wait a minute, I wake up at the same time. What do I do today? Every day's a Saturday. And, who cares what I have to say? What am I going to do? And wait a minute, I've been conditioned my whole life to put money in, and now you're telling me to take money out. And so there are people like Louise, and that is a true story, who come in and they do have a lot of known anxiety around, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to retire and what I'm going to do. But then I spend a lot of time trying to coach people through, being aware of the other things that are going to come at them that they weren't even, didn't even know to expect. Like that first market downturn after you retired feels very different than all the market downturns that, you were able to turn a blind eye to. So yeah, that it's a very real side. That's why, half of the book is dedicated to, that behavioral finance, or what I call the color or the soft side of retirement.
All right. So when you talk about someone being financially ready, like a Louise, but emotionally unsure, and you've done a lot of stuff in the behavior space, what usually sits underneath that fear? Like what is driving that fear about being emotionally unsure?
It's two things. It's one, what am I going to do? What's next? This is, I've spent 2/3 of my life working, and now I've got the remainder left. There's some people, I'm one of those folks who have a laundry list of things that, they want to pursue at a deeper level. And there's other people that really don't. They spent their entire career focused on their career. That's how they spent their time. Maybe they were raising families. Families have moved on. And now what? So it's this fear of the unknown. What am I going to do? It's kind of like going to work at a brand new job, right? You don't know who the players are going to be. You're not sure what your role is going to be. You're not sure, what's going to make you happy. Where are you going to find that? And it's those people that are aware of it that, have the anxiety. There's some people that aren't even aware, and then they wake up and they do what we call failing retirement, which is they're retired for, a month or two, and then they're, right back to looking for something to do. So it's so definitely, that side of it. What am I going to do? How am I going to fill my days? Most people, once they work through that, this is such a common phrase. We kind of laugh when we hear it, and there's like, how did I ever have time to work? That's what most people, find, but not everyone. And then there's the financial side of it, of even if I have enough, looking at, okay, but I've only got this bucket. And the further away from working that I am, the harder it is to go back to work. So if I start drawing this down, and then you start down this rabbit hole of, what if the market does this? And what if tax rates do this? And, the sky is falling kind of situation.
And you mentioned the word fail, and you're right about clients that fail in retirement. What is, I mean, I'm trying to picture, what does failing in retirement look like?
Well, we kind of joke about it, but failing in retirement to us is you were planning to retire and not go back to work, and then you're back to work. That's the basic definition of failing retirement is, you're right back at work. And we have some of those folks, and some people are fortunate to be in careers where that's possible, right? So they can consult, physicians. You have lots of doctors out there working until their 70s. There are teachers that can stay on. Anyway, there are careers where people can continue to work, but work is optional. But that's not true for everyone. And sometimes we, need to prepare folks that, we don't always have our health or the job, there to present itself to us. I'm kind of, when we talked about Louise, it was all about her, but this also affects families. When you have someone who was working, we kind of joke and say, between a husband and wife, one of those people retiring is kind of like moving in together for the first time. We had a little taste of that during COVID when we all moved back home, and it's like, wow, this is the person that I'm married to, and these are my kids, and these are my pets. I'm spending, every day, all day with these people in the house. But otherwise, normally in a relationship, we spend most of the day apart, and then we come back at the end of the day. And we also spend our time going to work, spending energy there, getting energy back, right? So I've already had conversations with all these people at the office today. People care what I have to say. And when I retire, my significant other may not care what I had to say. He doesn't want to be bossed around, right? Like, and those things. And so it can have a dynamic impact on relationships. What are we doing for lunch today? Well, the spouse may have already been doing the same thing they were going to do for lunch the last 30 years. And now, there's this new personality that moved in. So
Wow.
we talk about that some too.
So that's the emotional fallout of like getting into retirement. But then when you get into retirement, there's the emotional fallout of what you call stepping on tax landmines.
Yeah.
Well, first let's start. What does the tax landmine look like that these folks are stepping on, and then the fallout with it?
I mean, there's so much. Sometimes I call it collateral damage. People don't realize some of the decisions that they make. They're making at a singular focus and don't realize that it has impact on other things. So classic example would be somebody that comes in and, they've received a severance or, some other, cash payment. They've saved cash to be able to make this first transition because they think about the retirement dollars. Again, those are the sacred dollars. We've set those aside and we're not supposed to touch them. And so they'll start off their retirement spending those dollars down. And I tell people the one of the worst scenarios that I can have for somebody is they come in and all they have is that one 401k. Right? They've got Social Security, maybe they have a pension, and then they just got this 401k. We have zero control over our tax bracket in retirement. So we speak a lot about, continuing to make sure that we can control our tax bracket by having different buckets of money so that I can decide how much taxable income I want. If I want to buy a new car, not only do I have my regular income, maybe that I'm living off the portfolio, but I don't have to take $75,000 out of my 401k to buy a $50,000 car. I can, balance that depending upon what tax bracket I'm in. And then the other things, like people don't realize, I'm going to convert my Roth IRA because my tax bracket is, X, and they didn't realize that at 63, your Medicare premiums are being set. So your premiums when you turn 65 are based upon your income from 2 years prior. And that Roth conversion just pumps you up into, for a whole year, a higher Medicare surtax or means tax.
Let's talk about Roth IRAs, because I know that it's sort of like a sexy part of your industry. A lot of, since I think it started in the late '90s and has become more and more popular, even with like wealthy individuals. You hear
Sure.
like Silicon Valley billionaires like Peter Thiel, like really
Yep.
into Roth IRAs. So when a client comes to you and says like, I saw this thing on TikTok about converting to Roth IRAs, and or like my friend at the tennis club said I should convert to Roth IRAs. What's your initial reaction when people walking cold who probably have no knowledge of what Roth IRA is, but it sounds really cool to them?
It does sound cool, and it can honestly be really cool. That's an okay thing. Um, but my job in that arena then is to look at the numbers, because it's always all about the numbers, and then to help people, not unlike the book. Here's the numbers, and then here's the other decision points. Here's the softer side to that. So we can look at the numbers. Are we in a high tax bracket? Maybe it makes sense. We need the tax deduction today, so we don't want to do Roth or Roth 401k. We don't want to take dollars out of a taxable account today, take a big tax hit on them, and then how many years is it going to take to of tax-free growth to make up for all that tax we paid up front? So we have to run those numbers, and then we talk about the soft side, just like the book. We talk about the soft side, which is, but what if the rules change? And the rules can change. What if at some point there is something more like a national sales tax? And some people kind of look at me a little bit odd when I say that, but I remind especially those folks down in Texas. Ross Perot was one of, a major candidate that actually was an independent, made some really strong headway, and his platform was a national sales tax. And in a world like that, all your dollars are taxed the same. So we would have rather got a tax benefit up front, because that Roth IRA didn't mean anything in a world like that. And I'm not saying that that's a probability, but it's certainly a possibility. Or for, higher net worth folks, easy, for them to change the rules and say, your Roth IRA distribution is only tax free, if balances are under certain limits, things like that. So those are the kinds of things that, we tell people. Maybe we want to be a little bit cautious, especially if the numbers are borderline break even in terms of the tax benefit today.
Nice, good. Thanks for explaining that for me. So you are in Texas, mentioned it, and one of the things people kind of relate to Texas is oil. And
Yep.
you share the story about one of your clients who lost a third of their portfolio because their company had an oil spill.
Yep.
And I guess this sort of teaches, and which you kind of teach folks about, like these blind spots that
Yep.
you might have in
Yep.
investing. First, give us a little nugget of that story, because I want people to read about it. But like, give us a nugget, like in terms of like how that could be such a huge, I guess, ripple effect to your retirement if something happens with a large part of your portfolio.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of folks here in Texas that have a lot of energy stocks. Um, and energy stocks sometimes are a little bit more stable. And so we have these people that, kind of get really comfortable holding these stocks. It's been something that it was part of their career, given to them in the form of compensation. And all of a sudden, they're getting close to retirement and they have these really big balances in individual stocks. And, we can preach all day and pound the table. We don't want to have more than 10 or 15% in any one stock. I don't care what company it is, just because anything can happen to any one company. And this was unfortunately a classic example of what not to do. And it hit at the Murphy's Law. What will go wrong can go wrong at the worst possible time. And that was, right early on in retirement, for him. And that was dollars that, never came back, or, I mean, it came back like 15 years later. So, but we have situations like Enron. We have, lots and lots of stories about, companies that, no one expected. And one day they're here and the next day they're gone. So, we preach diversification, and sometimes that doesn't sound as sexy as, what hitting a home run with an individual stock might be, but we've got to have predictability into retirement. And so we talk about, okay, well, if we do have this stock, that's a great problem to have. How do we divest? What's the right method, the right pace, and then more importantly, what do we do with it once we've diversified?
And so in that world where you want people to diversify, I think now we're getting into a world where no, everyone's all about AI. Get me into Crystal, get me some
Yep.
AI stock. That stuff's
Yeah.
growing. I hear that's really good.
Yeah.
And I think we all feel it, and you probably feel it as well. There's a bubble coming. We don't know when, but
Right.
it's coming.
Right.
What do you tell folks when there are sort of trends like that
Yep.
they would like to hop on? How do you talk them off that ledge?
Yeah. I mean, we have to speak both sides of it because it's actually people are coming in with one or two. People are either think that there's a bubble and they're scared of it, or the opposite's true and they like it and they want more of it. But usually whatever's hot, right? That's the thing that it's hitting the top. So people ask about buying gold when gold's near an all-time high, or they ask about buying Bitcoin when gold's near an all-time high. They're not asking about it when it's at a low, which is when we should be buying those assets. But and things like AI, it's all about going back to that boring old conversation of diversification. It's okay to underweight certain sectors of the market, but we don't want to have too much of anything. And so that's a difficult thing with the AI and tech stocks right now, because if we, just look at an S&P 500 investment, if we break that out, it's already overweighted. So people will ask, should I have NVIDIA in the portfolio? Crystal, why aren't you buying NVIDIA stock? And if I show them their portfolio, and even though I didn't buy any directly, it's one of the top 3 or 4 holdings in the portfolio, just because we're getting so much through the S&P 500. So that's where we start, is showing people actually what they have. And then we can take it the next step, which is, if they want to have a piece of something that's a little bit more aggressive, a little bit, taking some risk with some dollars, we go about that with our head on straight, with an idea for how much that we want and why and what our exit plan is.
Have you ever had anyone, not that you would out a client, but have you ever had it? Because I remember hearing stories about this, and actually you hear it every time like Bitcoin blows up, of like, take all my stuff to crypto, or maybe take all my stuff to AI. Do you get clients like that sometimes? Like, let's push all the chips into this.
It's usually the opposite. So
Okay.
lots of retired clients. So instead we'll have like, I heard, so and so saying Buffett went to all cash. Okay, well, Buffett didn't go to all cash. Or they're hearing so and so saying, the market's going to crash, or we have a bubble. Shouldn't we move to cash, or move me to cash? I'm nervous. Those kinds of things. And unfortunately, that's usually the predictor of when the market's at a low and start to come back up. And so people are selling at the worst possible time. But that's a big part of my job, is holding hands. And it's what I referred to, earlier on in your show here, which is people feel so different about those kind of market events when they're retired. They don't have the ability to earn it back. And so it'll feel different. It'll feel more pronounced. It'll feel more real. And the truth of the matter is, every time you turn on the TV and the information's out there, whether it's, social media or, regular news outlets, somebody's always calling for the market to go down, but any given day, there's a 53% chance the market's going to be higher than the day before. And so, at some point, those people are going to be right. But I have to explain to people, yeah, the market's going to go down by 10%. That's actually a very normal part of the market cycle. The question is it going to go up 15% before it goes back down 10? And so that market timing is really hard. So we've got to build a portfolio. If you're coming to me and asking those questions, we've got to be able to have a portfolio instead that gets you comfortable, so that we're not having, to have these conversations. What's that plan B for if the market goes down and stays down? How do we keep you retired? Because my number one job is to make sure my clients never run out of money.
Yeah, I would say that's
Yeah.
that's the 1A.
Yeah.
Another thing you do is like sort of you become a friend to these people, because they sort of need that sort of either mentorship or just friendship, and a lot of it is because you're filling that gap. Because for many of us who have like white collar jobs, a lot of times your friends are work friends.
Yeah.
Like your friend circle. If you were to Venn diagram it, the biggest part of it is people that you know either through your work or through your industry. And so a lot of these people that retire probably look at that and be like, "Oh shit, I'm not gonna have any friends once I'm done work." And so I'm sure, Crystal, you get a lot of calls, like people want to pop in, see how you doing. But
Yeah.
tell me about the folks that are so worried about losing that sort of friend group at work.
And I know we talk about that. That's very real. And it's not just, the retiring and where are your people and who are you going to go to lunch with now? Those people are still at work. Or, the other side to that is, we want to go, move from Texas. Lots of people don't retire in Houston. We don't have much of a climate, we don't have much to look at. So people are leaving and going somewhere else, but you're leaving your entire network. You're leaving your network, not of not only of friends, but of, colleagues, of people that you can depend on, whether it's your handyman or your AC guy or your doctors, the whole thing, you're leaving all of that behind. And so that's very real. So it's doable, it's manageable. You're going to look for your next, transition. You're going to join groups, you're going to join a new church, you're going to join a new, volunteer organization, and you'll rebuild that network. But you just got to be aware of it, because otherwise you don't realize all this social interaction that we were getting at work. Now we're at home sitting in front of the TV. What do we do?
And something you talk about a lot is identity. And I think for many
Mhm.
generations, I'm a card carrying Gen Xer. I'm not going to, I don't know what club you're in, Crystal, but like Gen Xers, boomers, and even millennials to a certain extent, was that your job was your identity. You are
Yep.
Joe who works at blank. Like that's your, like,
Right.
if, and then, the normal conversation is like, what do you do for a living? I
Right.
feel like Gen Z and Alpha have kind of tuned away from that. They're more self-sufficient and don't need to identify themselves with work. But a lot of the people you are going to be working with over the next 10 years, you're probably going to have a lot of the Gen Xers retiring. Um, Tell me about that struggle with identity.
Yeah, huge. Because like I said, we get a lot of um, satisfaction and energy release in the things that we get up and go do every day, and know, people want to see us, people want to hear what we have to say. And that's kind of what I talked about earlier is, now our friend network, our family network, they don't care what we have to say, right? My opinion does not carry the same weight as it did in work. I'm used to people, we're all answering emails all day long, people asking us questions, we're making decisions. So not only is it an energy suck for us, meaning, that's how we are releasing energy, but we're also getting feedback, and it's the identity, it's who we are. um we actually talk about it on the opposite side of with our clients, and a phraseology that we stole from someone that says we want to help our clients make sure that they don't burden their children with their wealth. And what we mean by that is, by leaving kids, young adults, in the event, of a premature passing, too much wealth, we took all their motivation for creating them into who they are. Right now, they're not going to go, finish school. They're not going to get the jobs. They're not going to have the career. And that's really, I mean, think about how that built who we are. I mean, I think that there's some other things that relate to me as a person outside of work, but the biggest part is work. To your point, people that know me, they know what I do. They know how much time I spend at the office. And it's like, okay, if you strip that away, what's left? And so yeah, good, bad, and ugly. Work is who we are. So we've got to be able to re-identify that. And it's not easy.
And as you know, Crystal, biology is undefeated. Eventually, it comes for us all. But one of the great things is, because of technology and advancements in healthcare, people are living longer. And I'm
Absolutely.
curious if that plays a factor now with folks. Not that everyone expects to live to 100, but now that when people start to look, when they come to the end of their career, they're like, oh boy, so I'm going to be 65 soon, but like, do I have enough money in there to last if I make it to 90? Like,
Yeah.
how does that play a part in terms of like people's longevity and the added stress of knowing that maybe they worked for 30 years, right? They're probably going to be, if healthy and lucky, they may have 30 years of no work.
Right.
How does that work with people's brains?
Yeah, we tell people sometimes, tell me how long you're going to live. My job gets real easy, because we don't know. Or in your case, okay, maybe I live to 90, but what if I live to 92? What am I going to do with those last 2 years? So we recognize that, the industry recognizes it, the insurance industry recognizes it, and it's a big problem, because all of these wonderful and amazing things that the healthcare industry is doing with the help of AI, in many cases, we're solving disease, we're solving chronic issues, are allowing us to live longer, but not necessarily in the same health. So we're lingering, if you will, later on. And what is that going to look like? And, we've got to assume that, we're going to continue. Each generation lives longer than the generation before. And so we do talk about that. I have people all the time that say, yeah, no, I, here's my longevity. No way I'm going to live that long. I'm going to live to 85. And I say, maybe, but we got a big problem if you live to, 86. And so, in our planning, we, want to extend those dates, because it's, you know, a good problem to have, I suppose. But it's also, and this is where the insurance industry is in flux, because it's unpredictable what those years are going to cost. Are we living but having higher medical expense, for long-term care and elder care and things like that. Very difficult to plan for.
Yeah. So, we talked about what failing retirement, you call it, looks like. I'm curious, what is passing retirement? What does A plus retirement look like? Let's try to wrap things up in an
Yeah.
optimistic tone here. Like,
Yeah.
what is like getting an A plus report card on retirement look like?
And I think most folks are there. It just takes getting over that hump. And, we never, anytime we're going through a transition, we, need some coaching around that. But most folks do successfully, navigate that or find their own way. And for most folks, and this could just be, my experience, but most of the folks that we see that have prepared, that have made that transition into retirement, they're spending under their capacity. And I get the great fortune of being able to sit down and obviously, like I said, my number one job is to make sure my clients don't run out of money. And I have to have honest conversations if people are spending too much. If people are spending too much, the number one reason they're spending too much is they're spending too much on their kids. But most folks are living within their means, and I get to have the conversation reminding them how much more they could afford to spend because you're not always going to be this young and healthy. And so you want to enjoy, especially these early years of retirement when you have the energy to do these things. And so that's a wonderful part of my job to remind people, hey, you could spend another $1,000, $3,000, $5,000 a month. So how are you going to do it? And reminding them, because if you don't go and figure out a way to enjoy your retirement and do these things, your kids aren't going to blink an eye at spending the extra money because that's how inheritance works. Because they didn't have the blood, sweat, and tears to earn it, it will go fast. And so our joke there is if you don't fly first class, your kids will. Not everyone can afford to do that. But anyway, that's the fun side of retirement to me is the people that have done what they're supposed to do. They saved more, they sacrificed for that. And now they get the luxury of having, lots of flexibility in retirement. And that's really fun, to see the surprise and, people come in and say, I know you're going to tell me to spend more, but I'm doing everything I want to do. And so then we get to talk about other things like charitable giving and whatnot.
That's awesome. That's really good. Good, good. I
Yeah.
like that. So you've had this remarkable career, very successful. You've written this book now, I know all about it. And I always talk to people about this because, like, there is a sort of attitude of good for thee, but not for me kind of thing. Like, people don't practice what they're preach.
Right.
How does having this career, going through the research of writing this book, has it changed anything about the way you look at your own retirement or how you're going to handle things? Does it make it better? Does it now all of a sudden give you things to think about? 'Cause that's one thing, because all of us who are like in the world of thought leadership and
Yeah.
building authority, we're like, yeah, this is what you should do, but sometimes we don't always practice what we preach. So tell me
Right.
about, are you eating what you're making there?
I'm trying real hard to do that. I've got some very fun hobbies. I'm a birder. I love photography, and but I have to consider, how long, is that going to be fun for me? A lot of what I do is all about being outside, and what does that look like? Can I, will I always be healthy enough to pursue, these things that I enjoy doing? And are my friends and my, family, the people that I enjoy spending time with, they don't all love doing those things. And so, how do I strike the balance? So it does, cause you sometimes to self-reflect and think, am I doing these things? Am I setting my kids up? I've got two boys, one a sophomore in college, the other one we're senior in high school. And so we're looking at the career pathing for them. And, so there's a lot of thought for me about, what does this look like for them? Practicing what I preach in terms of, my estate plan for my two boys who, are the center of my world. So, how does all of that come together with my retirement? How am I going to spend time with them? Am I going to chase them across the country? If they don't choose careers in Houston, things like that. So hopefully I'm a little bit prepared than most folks, but yeah, we all have our challenges. Most of us all have the same goals, want to educate our children, want to retire one day, want to live our life today. And those three things tug at each other. And so you're not wrong for bringing that up, that we all have those goals and those challenges.
Awesome. And on the subject of parenthood, Crystal, I always wrap up these conversations taking folks behind the dedication of the book, and you dedicated it to my incredible parents, Bill and Gail. Thank you for being the best parents a girl could ask for. Tell me why it was so important to dedicate it to your folks.
Yeah, so I'm the not the stay-at-home mom, but I had the stay-at-home mom, and none of us, I think, go about a path like that with the intention of, I'm going to do it this way or that way. It's like just as how life presented itself to me. So I was very fortunate to have a stay-at-home mom, but I also had parents that showed me a couple of really hard life lessons. One I saw, when raising three girls, that times were tight. My mom went and substitute taught. My dad took an extra job. Fortunate to have parents who raised me that I never even knew that college was an option. It was, you graduate high school and which college are you going to? I spent a lot of work uncovering, how we can do better at that, because not every family has that. And it changes lives for people. But my parents didn't make it easy for me. Early in my career in a sales role 29 years ago, and it was hard for a female starting out and trying to build this career, and went back and asked my parents for money. And, they said, okay, but you're moving back home. And I didn't want to move back home. And my parents could have afforded to just help me out financially. And that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And they did the exact right thing, which is to say, we'll help you, but you're moving back home. We're not going to pay for you to live, across town where you like to live. And so I said, never mind, I'll figure it out. And you know what? I worked harder, and I think that helped shape who I am today. And so my parents went through a lot of what is detailed in the book, with my dad, working hard, saving, telling your kids no, because you've got to set those boundaries, and then navigating that transition into retirement. My mom, this is the opposite side of the story. My mom recognized that when my dad retired, that he wanted to spend time with the classical example. He wanted to spend more time playing golf. And so well before my dad retired, my mom took golf lessons because she wanted to spend more time with him. And the funny story is, she ended up being a better golfer than him. They still play to this day. They won the couples club championship a couple of times. So anyway, those kinds of things, it's not just my experience with my clients, but obviously my own life lessons that are, portrayed in the book.
Awesome. You can read all about it in the next chapter, Navigating Life and Wealth in Retirement. She is Crystal Lynn Garrett. Crystal, thanks so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Crystal and her other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.